Hi there. So, there's a good question about the specific identification method. Um, just a couple of things that's actually worth mentioning here is this method is different than the others in that we actually have these items and we label them here. So there's an activity, and unlike the other methods, you're actually not going to be able to see the activity here. As you can see, it goes directly with goods purchased, the number of units and cost per unit, and then the cost of goods sold, and then the balance for the inventory. However, and like the other methods, it's specific identification, and that's the reason why it's called identification, because it identifies the level of the type of activity the operations are being involved in. Okay, so that's one thing. So now that we have this clear, so the level of activity here um, are just basically purchases and beginning inventory purchases and beginning inventory because the sales part, the sales of that, all of the sales are going to be directly indicated and stated here in the cost of goods columns. And it's different with the other methods since you have a specific column and a specific row for sale or for purchases. Okay. So for example, here, the January 1st beginning inventory, we're talking about the weighted average, LIFO, FIFO too. So the beginning inventory, which is 140, appears here in the inventory balance column. We already know this is the cost per unit um, the cost per unit and how much it cost the company to basically to purchase that according to ending inventory from the prior cycle. And this is a total of $840. And then look at that, January 10th. January 10th is a sale. How do you know? How do you recognize it's a sale? Or how can you record that it is a sale? A sale is, of course, built-in cost of goods sold because it's sold. You're selling something. You're selling merchandise inventory. So this is the number of units, right? And again, there is a little, strategy if it's FIFO, if it's LIFO, if it's weighted average cost. But the point is the cost per unit is put in here after being calculated, depending on the different methods. But you got the number of units here, and you don't see anything else here in the goods purchased row, right? So we're talking just about January 10th. There's nothing, there's nothing on purchases side, but there's only sales side, the sales side, which should be only filled in the cost of goods sold row. Does that make sense? Now, January 20th, now we're moving to a purchase process. So how do we register? How do we record it as a purchase? Because we're only going to focus on the goods purchased column and rows. Okay, so all of this here, look at that. Look at that. So only the purchase column is being touched, and you don't touch anything about the cost of goods sold. All of this is just blank, right? So we're talking about the weighted average, the LIFO, FIFO, all of them are actually going to be kind of the same. So look at that. So here, for example, so this is January 25th, and January 25th, there's a sale. If you go to the instructions, you're going to see a sale. So this sale is right, and the sale is going to be recorded, of course, in the cost of goods sold column and rows. You don't touch the purchase or goods purchased columns or rows at all. Is that okay? Now, what about if you go to a purchase, for example, January 20th? Now, again, we're talking about the weighted average, the FIFO, and the LIFO. The specific identification follows a different process, which is very, very easy to understand. I'm going to get to that point in a moment. But here in the January 20th purchase process, for example, we're only going to touch the goods purchased columns and rows, and we're going to leave the cost of goods side in blank, absolutely blank. And so the company interchangeably is going to be involved in doing both making purchases and making sales. So we can mix the rows and columns between purchases and sales. They are going to be in different different rows and different columns as well. And that is something that does not happen with the specific identification. Is that okay? So specific identification, as you can see, the sale and the purchase basically happens at the same time, or at least they are recorded in the same row. Okay. So for example, here it says oh, something else that we need to remember. The cost per unit is calculated in the weighted average and LIFO and the FIFO. The cost per unit is basically calculated, depends on, um, basically depends on time length, or basically depends on recent purchases or oldest purchases, right? If it's a FIFO, we're going to work with the oldest products, or the first product purchased, first in, and those are the ones that are going to be first out or sold. And conversely with LIFO, we are going to sell first the ones that we purchased last, right? So that's the reason why it's last in, first out, or last in. Yeah, last in, first out. Okay, but here, specific identification. So one more time, we got available for sale. We have an activity here, and activity is going to be recorded for beginning inventory and purchases, and the sold or the sell part of that is going to be recorded in the cost of goods sold columns and rows here. Okay, so one more time, purchases and sales, purchases and beginning inventory. I should mention. So beginning inventory and purchases are in the available for sale column and rows, and sales are recorded in the cost of goods sold columns and rows as well. So every time we have a sale, we're going to record it right next to the beginning inventory or the purchase. And something else here. So something else here, the quantity for the specific identifications, the problem needs to give us the details on the quantity of inventory being sold. So here, for example, the units sold for, in general here for the general problem, we have that January 10th, on January 10th, we have 100 units being sold. So on those 100 units need to be distributed in the weighted average, the LIFO and the FIFO, strategically following those specific steps that each inventory costing method follows. But here in the specific identification, we can't follow that pattern. We can't follow that criteria. So we need to follow a specific. Well, we're definitely talking specifications here in the problem. There is a reason here why here on top of the problem, you're going to see the company uses a proportional inventory system for a specific identification, not for the other ones, because the other ones you can see what you are, or the quantity you are going to sell on these specific dates for weighted average, LIFO, and FIFO, but not for a specific identification. It follows a different number. It follows a different flow of selling, right? So for a specific identification, ending inventory consists of 180 units from the January 30 purchase. So January 30 purchase, we know just by looking at this activity here, we know that in January 20, the company purchased 180 units and at $4.5 per unit. So we just copy and paste, basically, January 30th, we purchased 180 units at $4.5 per unit. Is that okay? Now, what happens on the cost of goods sold side? The problem is already telling you that 180 were ending inventory. 180 were 88 were ending inventory, so 180 here. So how many units were sold? If you purchased 180 and your ending inventory for this specific day, January 30th, is 180, it means that no unit was sold. No unit was sold out of those 180. And as you can see here, I just make a little formula, a subtraction, available for sale minus ending inventory. And that's the reason why you see a line there, a dash, indicating that this is a zero quantity. And we're going to do the same for January 20th now. So look at what happens on January 20th. The January 20th, we purchased 60 units at $5 per unit. So just copy and paste. January 20th, we purchased. Now remember, you need to put in the activity here. January 20th is a purchase. So we purchased 60 units at $5 per unit. And what about the cost of goods sold? Well, in this case, the problem is not telling you the number of cost or the number of units sold, but it's giving you the ending inventory. So we just do a little subtraction there. So what's the ending inventory for all the units purchased on January 20th? On January 20th, again, we purchased 60, out of which 5 ended up in ending inventory. 5 units are ending inventory. So as you can see here, 5 are ending inventory. So I just do a little mathematic, cost of goods available for sale. There are 60 minus ending inventory, 5. So that means that 55 were sold. And we do exactly the same for the beginning inventory here. So in the beginning inventory, it says 15 units from the beginning inventory, of course, ended up in ending inventory. They are giving us the information and the details for ending inventory quantities. So if the problem has already given me 180 units for beginning inventory at $6 per unit, so I just copy and paste 140, 6 units, or $6 per unit. And it's already telling me 15 units out of this 140 ended up in ending inventory. The prices per unit is not going to change. It's exactly the same. It's just a copy and paste of the available for sale. So 15 units ended up in ending inventory out of those 140 units from beginning inventory. We just do the little mathematics, a subtraction. 140 minus the ending inventory, which is 15, which means that 125 must have been sold. And yeah, we just do a sum there. So available for sale are 380 units available for sale. We do the little mathematics here, 125, 55, and 0. So that means 180 units were sold. We just do the multiplication here. Cost of goods sold are $1,025. Sorry, $1,025. Ending inventory, we do a sum here. We do an addition. 200 units ended up in ending inventory for a total price of $925. I hope that helped a little bit here.